Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first and last word poetry series. And tonight we have three wonderful readers. And our first reader is Tom Daley. His poetry has been published in Fence, Denver Quarterly, Massachusetts Review, Prairie Schooner, Crazyhorse, North American Review, and many other journals. His books are House You Cannot Reach, Poems in the Voice of My Mother and Other Poems, and Far Cry. He leads online workshops in poetry and memoir writing. And I give you Tom.
Thank you, Gloria, and thank you to Harris for inviting me to come. It's an honor to read with Tim and Alex, two very fine poets and two lovely people as well. So I'm going to be reading a few new poems and a couple of poems from my chapbook. The first poem is called Self-Portrait in the Voice of My Barber. This customer's ear tips tilt a little outwards. He smells of frankincense and catmint. At the back of his head, a bald spot expanding like Antarctica at the beginning of the last ice age. I can tell by its shape that his bulbous skull gave him a little shock. When, crew-cutted at age 9 or 10, he saw it in profile for the first time. As he tried on a Madras sports jacket in the three-way mirror at the Woodward and Lothrop in Alexandria, Virginia. I ask him to slump a little in the barber chair. He smells of melanoma and that burnt skin aroma arising from laser repair in a dermatologist's office. He never squirms. He inquires politely after the owner, who has had a heart attack in Greece at the age of 89 and is breathing with difficulty in the deranging smoke from this hotted up summer. This customer smells of baby oil on private beaches, of the bad gravy they make in high school kitchens, of the chlorine in the hot tub at the baths in Detroit, where he soaked naked and unaroused with a goofball who grilled him on trivia from the appendix at the back of The Lord of the Rings. He smells of lathe fume, of overused drill press coolant, of the rot in Leon Trotsky's assessment of the prospects for workers' revolution. His fingers are stained with Pelikan 4001 brown fountain pen ink. He has never changed the oil in his car's engine. He hates to weed. He is interested in my investment strategies, but scoffs at buying stock in spandex. Next time, I will remember his name. Next time, he will remember that I told him that his cowlick falls to the right, not the left, as he proposed for haircuts before me. Next time, I wonder if he will do more than ogle the lanky fellow in the muscle shirt, who keeps forgetting we only accept cash. Next time, I will be certain that his curious elbow would never dare probe my crotch. Next time, he will know that death is a sometimes long-winded affair, and only a curious barber like me can coarsen the edge of its narrowing shave. This next poem is called Gaza. Dance of the disappearing fire. The fire that has forgotten its signature dew point, its mordant half-life, its fractals that will neither bleed nor blur. Dance of the abundant onion, the skin of its radiant and clotting sugar, its sway and percolations, its layers of time grimed with root cellar weather. Dance of the rickety ticket, admitting only a tumble into the drought-dry wishing well in which we imagine war and its amnesiac bruise. So I'm in the middle of writing a bunch of poems that are in the voice of an atheist who is addressing the God of what Christians call the Old Testament, asking what has happened to his fellow choir mates. These are all psalms. This one is Psalm after the death of Dickie Betts of the Allman Brothers Band, and it's for Jonathan McBee. O Lord, who blesses and bleeds all the skidding motorcycles of the world, how is it that in my diminishment I am ruptured into a loneliness that once seemed fended off by the Herculean smiles we shared when we were high? He and I, who traded right up to the limits of righteous male affection in a kind of hyperactive glee, listened to Dickie Betts and his brothers blistering and listing in the disheveled cyclones that blew down their fingertips from some heavenly turbulence into our auditory nerves. And we grinned those grins that start under the archway of the footsole and run like sparks from the trackless trolley wires up to the hole in the top of the skull, where joy funnels its jam and its screech and liquefies into a brotherhood over the paving stones of a youthful beatitude, a blessing that still slips like a bottleneck over the frayed telegraph of a guitar string, stretched all the way from here to a companionable and high-fiving, red-eyed affinity. This psalm is called The Busboy Who Starred in The Boyfriend. O you who made both poultice and pustule, grant me that Jonathan did not rot to Kaposi sarcoma. Grant me he did not flush that killer kickstand cracking virus into his paramour. The guy, twice his age, conducting Jonathan in a Carmen Ghia convertible through Harvard Square. The guy with the Sonny Liston hips and black glasses frame, thick as Malcolm X's. The guy who flung back a comradely, "Ah, no," when I taunted him, "You've got a live one there." That was the last time I saw Jonathan, O Lord, and he was more of 21 or less. If he is alive, he'd have 60 under his svelte belt. He was thin as a lacquered chopstick then, tall as a coat stand, with a rash of acne cheating on his chin, his mouth meekly overbit and chippy with eye teeth, a cowlick's tongue lobbing itself to the left side of his forehead. Who can forget, Lord, how he roller-rinked his knees in the Funt-Bun Academy production of The Boyfriend, as if he were squishing grapes in a steel vat while primping his lips with bunk bed insistence through his musical numbers. Tell me, O Lord, who shadows all the sundials, who perforates all the pages of the page-a-day calendars, that you have not yet demagnetized Jonathan's perky alertness, that you did not corral his kinfolk back to the funeral home with armchairs upholstered in shiny black vinyl before he was 30. Wasn't it enough, Lord, that you jammed the tailpipe of his older brother's car into a snowbank while he chattered away the Saturday night cold with his girlfriend, and they both woke up in that heaven where even the archangels dream in carbon monoxide? Wasn't it enough that I loved him in part because he reminded me of my own lick-spittled mimic of a brother, that madcap card-packed joker who slapped an unlit cigarette between his teeth at 20 and sprinted off a 10-story building roof across from Boston's gold-domed State House in the middle of the Good Friday recess? This psalm is called The Roughhousers. O you who whirl all the motorboat engine oil slicks over the skin of Chesapeake Bay, can you tell me which of that pair of brothers has collided during a pleasure cruise and bled himself dry in the salt washes outside Annapolis? A neighbor who told me the news couldn't remember which one of them had died. They were a constituent of the wrangling cohort which learned its moves on the hill down which Ruffner Road drained its deluges into the timber branch. Over the burnt yellow lawns of zoysia grass, we hurled and unfurled each other into the traps that incipient puberty had engineered for our tidy loins. We tricked and tripped and crushed each other with the innocent pressure and heat that would turn marvelous and perilous as we sprouted hair that darkened in all the important places. The brothers' parents stayed on Ruffner Road long after the parents of all the other wrestlers in our squad found themselves staring skyward in the adjacent cemetery on Ivy Hill. Now, I imagine the brothers' mother who banned roughhousing in their basement, still leaning from their front stoop at dinner time and squeezing the loud bulb of the bicycle horn to summon her drowned son out from under the slickest tide the Chesapeake had ever heaved. This is called Ethan Frome for James and Noah. I miss you greatly already, though our time together took less time than it takes to read a great novella about how an unsatisfied connection leads to a deliberate collision between a sled and the trunk of a tree. One of you writes that you miss me too, but that side of me that smells every piece of toast in a toaster as destined for charcoal predicts that your tongue will soon seek out a less vulnerable variety of bread for the cutting board of your companionability. And yet, I know that I will often sniff out the air for a yeasty whiff of how our smiles seem to sprint together in a tandem more tightly coiled than the springs of a toaster. So now I'm going to read a couple of poems from my chapbook. This is called Far Cry. It was published in 2022 by Ethel Zine Press. And it is available at the Grolier Poetry Bookshop in Harvard Square and also on their website. This is the title poem, Far Cry. Although we couldn't hear it, okay, so all these poems in this book are addressed to a friend of mine with whom I had become estranged several years before he died. And he was someone I loved dearly and loved like a brother, but he was too difficult to handle. So when he died, it was a double blow. We were never going to fix the estrangement, and he was gone forever. So this is addressed to him. Far Cry. Though we couldn't hear it from where we lived, just north and west of us, the humid and eerie cry of gibbons imprisoned in the zoo hooted in rebounding ululations over the row houses of DC's Mount Pleasant. A truncated hiccup fused with the urgent inhaled coo of a woman trying to suppress the commotion of her passion so as to not disturb her neighbors. The cry repeated itself with the heft of a ritual syllable, accelerating, amplifying, crowding itself into the stolid mortar of the chimneys it brushed. It seemed to assert the primacy of impulse over deliberation, to warn that degrees of order are a fragile bulwark against the incursions of the whooping vocalizations of the hemmed in and the caged. Now, your gone voice cruises over the roofs of Northwest Washington. Your old sexual hunger hunkering its pangs between the zippers and the condoms. Your lips rummaging the air for downdrafts, for the stir from the cellar holes, for the good stink of the chimney shafts. And before I read my last poem, I just want to thank Gloria and Harris again for inviting me to read, for keeping these series going for all these years. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. My last poem is called I Send You Off with the Words of a Pop Song Looping in My Ears. Bursting behind us now, the Atlantic in late May. Your piggy on my back then, the two of us a pair of brawling horseshoe crabs falling backwards into the foam. We crossed the Chesapeake to get here, spinning the long span of the bridge at breakneck, the words of the Starbucks song, Moonlight Feels Right, spangling our earlobes. Your smiles are demure, and murderously limbed with the caution we are tossing to the wind. All quirk and plenteous play, and never a dull boy, never a moment not spent in the delirium of your trembling wish to resound with the spritzing bliss of a wave and a cock and a fist. Always and every afternoon to fish and simmer in your barefoot glow. Never a time like this to know that the future will find us, but never let us go. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. That was a great combination of different forms, especially that last one was definitely an interesting form. You have a great way with words and language. And I find that over the years, your poetry has gotten more accessible. That the door is wider open for people to enter. Anyway, thank you very much. It was excellent, excellent grouping. Our next poet up is going to be Alexander Levering Kern. He's a widely published poet. He's a chaplain. He's an editor of I can't read my own writing, of the acclaimed anthology Becoming Fire, a spiritual writing from rising generations. Also co-editor of Pensive, a global journal of spirituality and the arts. His debut collection is What an Island Knows. And it's I've been reading the collection. I'm halfway into it, and it's quite amazing, and I do recommend it. So please welcome Alexander Levering Kern.
Thank you, Harris, for that kind introduction, and thank you, Gloria, for organizing this, both of you. You're really quite wonderful to have committed to this series for so long. So it's called the First and Last Word Poetry Series, but I'm the middle word, honestly, here, sandwiched between two wonderful poets whose work I admire. So between their yeasty, in Tom's word, their yeasty whole wheat offerings, hopefully I'm offering something more than peanut butter and jelly or bologna today. But that said, these are poems from the new collection, my debut collection, poems written over 20 years on an extraordinary place called Chebeague Island off the coast of Portland. And it's a love letter, it's a spiritual memoir, it's poetry of place and local history, and it honors the legacy of the Wabanaki Indian community, who were the first dwellers in that land. The first poem in the collection is called Passage Over. Like a nautical compass, we long for true north, wherever that place may be. It's high tide that draws us here, summer natives and islanders, driftwood jettisoned from the mainland, from every hidden corner of worry and need. There's a collective exhaling we feel on the bus that trundles us down to the ferry dock. Strangers, neighbors, familiar dogs, each sniffing for ocean air. We are ritual people, loading and unloading our common freight, hand over hand, like the solstice dance of a medieval village, the weak always helping the strong. Soon our luggage will rest in the ferry, and we'll nod and smile, unburdened for now. The island waits, and when we reach the shore, we'll go our separate ways. I hope each of you finds a true north place this summer, a place of renewal and restoration of your own. What binds us to the world? The title of this poem is taken from the title of a book by one of my favorite poets, Robert Cording. What binds us to the world? What binds us to the world is not the tendon extending from heel to calf, the one I always feared would tear, nor the fickle magnet of gravity, nor the way we place our flags in dirt on mountaintops in foreign lands. Instead, it's the gaze into the heart of things, the listening to the mystery of the mourning dove and snowy owl, sheltering there behind the veil, the soft of evening wrapping its arms around the hamlet of our lives, the play of light upon our eyes, weeping at the impermanence, a voice by the hearth telling the story of mud and tide, aspen and pine, and the search for common things. This next poem, I think in the 19th century, there was probably a law against people smiling in photographs. That's certainly been my experience at the National Portrait Gallery and elsewhere. On the island of Shabik, there's a wonderful museum, and I came across this photograph, a photograph of the Eben and Susan Littlefield Bates house, circa 1878. The house still stands, the barn too, near the place where South Road veers toward Deer Point, beside a broken clamshell path. In the photograph, slightly askew, the Greek revival stands. In a long dark dress, a woman stands beside an old mustachioed man, an appropriate distance for modesty. Nearby, a younger woman watches her children play beside the bones of a whale watched up from the sea. Its rib cage shines in the summer sun, and in that solemn instant, the young woman grins, defying all laws of photography in the black and white 19th century. But who could blame her standing still, her children frolicking among the bones? This is a poem for my friend of blessed memory who, like me, grew up in Washington, D.C., a place that Tom Daley evokes so beautifully and meaningfully in his poetry. It's wonderful to hear D.C. This evening, as well as this island in Maine. After 14 years, for Daniel Patrick O'Connor, 1971 to 1991. You're here in the wild grin of bound boulders along the jewel-crusted coast of Maine. You're here in the panting of the dog by my side, in the way the wind blows through an empty blue bottle, like a flute from the Andes, or the high lonesome sound of the Blue Ridge we once knew. You're here in the quicksand and the low groan of foghorns, in the sharp scent of pine needles returning to earth. You're the breeze in a coffee mug, smiling improbably, lying in wait on the path to the sea. Walking this garden in the cool of the evening, I find myself asking, where are you now? I know only this, dear friend long departed. You've poured out your life into this luminous world. There's nowhere now you are not. Somerville is famous for its raccoons and other critters of the night, as is the island in Maine, Shabig. This poem is called Of Raccoons, Moons, and Other Creatures of the Night. Many of these poems are stories about my children growing from their birth through age 17 and 22 this year. My son had a stuffed animal, his lovey, named Sister Monkey. Of raccoons, moons, and other creatures of the night. Oh, to be an arrow on a string, cut loose from any expectation of who or what this man might be. Now the arrowhead points to the sun, then to the far side of afternoon, where a harvest moon is swinging low, and the organ grinder inside my mind is singing love songs as Sister Monkey sings along. Fly me to the moon, they sing before the warm breath of night exhales. O moon out prancing over the island, mirror image of the tangerine sun, gazing tenderly like lovers at dusk. Let your mind sink deeply into your heart and abide there all day, as the old monk says. Yours is the day, yours also the night. Your every motion is love. Fearless now is the great raccoon, bottom wobbling down the forest path. There's no shame, brother mammal, in strutting your stuff. No audience needed, no bugle bear. Just head up the steps, up by your claws, up by whatever grace made this world and keeps us still. Never leaves us to fate like yo-yos spinning at the short end of a string. Oh, wily old moon and soft summer sun, don't leave me now to the talons of night. Let me sing in time with your ravenous stars the song of the heron, the osprey, the deer, all tethered to the world we love. This next poem is about probably my worst parental fail. Shabig is one of the few unbridged islands remaining in the Casco Bay, or in all of Maine for that matter, one of 15 unbridged islands. And it's attached to another little island, but only at low tide. When the tide moves out, you may be trapped on the little island, as I learned well. Lost on the little island. If I told you that low tide exposes a naked spit and you could walk over the sand to the other island, would you follow me to Little Shabig? If I told you that invasive species would curl their tongues, that chokeberry and poison oak lie in wait, would you walk this path with me? If I told you that my children and I would leave their mother sitting in a pool of shade beneath a spruce, and we'd traverse the ruins of a clamshell path, past the cavernous cellar of the burnt hotel, and deserted cottages of the naval base with empty eyes and phantom floors, would curiosity or fear draw you in? If I told you then that my barefoot boy would cut his foot upon a rock, that he and his sister would cry and cry as if abandoned to the night, how would you counsel me then? If I told you fear is another name for parched summer grass and endless paths, would you question my resolve? If I'd known then that their mother would run in panic along the silent trails, that we'd yell for help until the tide came in, that we'd stagger along the northern shore past the ghosts of Union veterans and silent Victorians in summer hats and parasols, past cannons firing for the 4th of July, would you follow me there and back? If I told you my wife began to plan a nautical rescue, and if I said my son's name is Elias the Bold, and my daughter I call Ruthanna of 9 Lives, would it all cohere? Would it all make sense? If I told you we'd reach the vanishing point before the isthmus disappeared beneath high tide, and we'd see my wife running, waving an orange towel, SOS, and our arms would be strengthened by bearing the weight of our children, would you believe me then? We survived, but it was a close call. Dignity of work. So I'm Quaker, and I married into this wonderful Quaker from DC. Married into this large, wonderful Irish and Jewish family from New England. And 40 of us get together every 4th of July week on this island. And this one is about the work that we do together. Dignity of work. Highfalutin, that's what I was, as I scrubbed the table after supper in Maine and spoke of the dignity of work. My wife laughed out loud at the utter pretense of wrapping myself in the mantle of labor, as if setting the table were equivalent somehow to packing grapes in the fields of Salinas, or working the looms in the mills of Lowell, or clearing the hardwood forest for roads in the conscientious objector camps of the Second World War. But falute away, I say, and smile, remembering the wild things gnashing their terrible teeth at Max, who refused to do his chores, remembering, too, the small satisfaction of dirt undone, of stains removed or wished away. Here in the cottage, we gather for rest, between scrubbing pots and fixing meals, and building from nothing 4th of July floats, we summer people from somewhere else, laying down for a moment the tools of our trades, carpenters, dressmakers, writers and builders, crunchers of numbers and daycare providers, fixers and helpers of every sort, remembering once more the great work that Sabbath rest is. Do I have 1 or 2 more minutes, Gloria? I know I was supposed to be keeping track of my time.
Go ahead.
Okay. The soul put back together. And many thanks to the beloved Martha Collins and her crew for helping to workshop this poem. The soul put back together. There's a flurry of music over the water. and the black-eyed Susans lean in to listen, bending their golden ears. Down by the inn, an island band is singing slow. The Beatles plea to come together as the bride and groom begin their dance. The world is a river of dreams. Here in the cottage, our daughter sleeps, dreaming of islands and castles of sand. I recall the words she shared before bed. We're going to the west of the day, surviving. Dusk comes aching through the pines. The teepee is empty out in the meadow. Bats swoop overhead. A silver moon crawls across my beard. An old truck shudders down Carter's Point Road. How long since I've been down the Shenandoah Valley? How far to my grandfather's mountain? My grandparents were Quaker orchardists in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and that was my sacred place, my magic place, growing up, as this island is for my children. I'll leave for later sometime my poem about wrestling with war and Black Lives Matter and Indigenous, some of the more social justice themes poems of this work. One can't really be on an island, as Betsy Scholl says in the foreword. Sometimes an island isn't really an island. If an island is a place of remove, we can't escape the world, but we can reflect and renew and gird ourselves for the work ahead. But this final poem is called The Shape of Gratitude. Island, it's you who called me into being. You called me to act. You made me a home. A place apart, but not so far we could not see to the end of the dream. You, island, you knew our names before we did. In the murmur of the ferry and the waves slapping against the pier, as if on drums, and in the squeal of gulls and the putter of the lobster boats, you knew the seagulls caterwauling, the crickets whisper behind the leaves, the honey ushering nightfall down, and the morning beckoning, come see what love will do. And that last line is an allusion to the Quaker founder of Pennsylvania, William Penn, who invited us to come see what love will do, even as Pennsylvania is on Indigenous land. So thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Harris. Thank you, friends. It's wonderful to see my fellow Shanti Arts mate in publishing, Marjorie Maddox here, and dear friends, Keith in the house, Tim, Denise, Lee. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Alex. That was also a nice selection from your new debut collection, What an Island Knows. So next up, we're going to have another amazing poet, Tim Suermondt. He's got 6 full-length published collections, and his 6th collection is The Great Beauty of the World, published in 2023 by MadHat Press. His next collection is Spring Training in Paris, which is going to be published later in 2024 this year. He's published poetry in Poetry, Ploughshares, Prairie Schooner, Georgia Review, Strand Magazine, Smartish Pace, Lore, Plume, and many others. He lives in Cambridge with his equally well-known wife, the poet Pui Ying Wong. Please welcome another amazing poet, Tim Suermondt.
Thank you, Harris, for the introduction, and thank you and Gloria for inviting me. And it's good to hear Tom and Michael read their work. And it's good to be reading after them, although I better be on my game or I'm in trouble. I'll do the best I can. And thanks to all of you for coming this evening. It's quite an honor, believe me. I'm going to be reading just 10 poems, but they should come in easily under the 15-minute limit. The Great American Poem. To my mind, I've already written 10 poems that qualify, but that's a ton of hubris. So allow me to amend fast. I haven't yet written the Great American Poem, though I'm close and suspect it will appear any day now, like a city skyline, magically reappearing after a long bout with fog. This poem might even be the one. I feel a cosmic commotion of validation, a soft scratching of wings, and see sun rays settling on my study's table, my messy rows of wonderful books. And of course, as Harris mentioned, Pui Ying Wong is not only my wife, but a terrific poet. So she appears quite often in my poems, as she does here. It's done beautifully again. My wife, Pui Ying, shows me her latest poem. I hope I did what I wanted to do here. What she did do is stark and lush, an abandoned castle, and a boulevard teeming with revelers opening the reserve of morning, a welcoming. How difficult it is to merge a heartache with a gratitude and make it work on the page as well as in life. I tell her I may be stealing some of her images, the old dynasty boats disappearing down river on the way to becoming modern, and I proclaim her poem a masterpiece and worry about the poem I'm working on, much to be executed there, gratitude proving slippery as a theft I would never try. Edgar Quinet. I knew him first as a subway stop, and the area washed with cafes and restaurants, a memorial site to Josephine Baker down the block, across from a sparkling supermarket. With quick research, I discovered that Quinet was a writer too, even wrote some poetry, obviously a brave man. I'm hopeless, someone who still believes in the rights of man, despite the growing number who desire to give and receive a boot in the face. When I return, I'll carve out some time to visit his gravesite at Montparnasse. Greet him the way we always greet the dead, with respect and a nonchalance, because we're still alive, capable of falling in love any minute now, dreaming on the metro of all things possible. Those on the wall will be there forever. They deserve to be there. For years, I've joked that I'm a lover, not a fighter. Shiny knives thrust in words, the best tough guy stance I can muster. I wave to a woman with streaks of red in her hair because I think she's waving at me. She isn't. I finish my beer, bangers and mash, and look a last time at the photos. Easter around the corner, as it was once for these men. A group on the street is singing proudly. Nothing Irish, but lovely all the same. Hotel Odessa. On my first morning in Paris, I paused at my apartment window, holding a croissant and a mug of coffee, and watching people go in and out of the hotel's entrance, convinced each one of them was a spy, good and bad. How the imagination of youth still clings at the age we should know better. Minutes later, I got fully clothed and made my way to the hotel's small lobby, hoping a man with a pronounced scar or a woman whose beauty is timeless would show me a folder and say, "You must get this to the American Embassy in Prague by midnight." The impossibility and danger of the task making it divine. While I wound up sitting on a velvet chair, retying a shoelace, playing back in my mind the chance I might have had of saving some, perhaps all of the world. And when I left, I looked both ways down the street. Bartleby in Ho Chi Minh City. And I should point out this poem and another one, read two poems that would come from my latest collection, A Doughnut and the Great Beauty of the World. And then two more after that from Springtime in Paris, which will be coming out later. This is, again, Bartleby in Ho Chi Minh City. Never mind the rejections that follow you even here, coming today in a torrent like the motorbikers who buzz up and down the length of the streets and everywhere. Think of the textile workers at the factory in the Camden district, doing their nonce hard work among an army of ingenious machines. Delete the bald-faced announcements of failure from history. There. They never happened. Open each window wide as it will go. Celebrate the lovely December air and start spinning another poem. It doesn't matter that no one wants but you. Republic. The women were beautiful and Baroque. So many kinds and styles clustered on the square right before the day turned into night. I looked at a group of young Mayas decked out in their colored finery, commandeering the tables of the restaurant near the military statues, near the fleet of shiny pedicabs, and the boy juggler who tossed rings in the air that had an excellent chance of not coming back to Earth. And 2 poems from spring training in Paris. Longevity. The city and I have gotten older. When we walk arm in arm now for the sake of walking, this is as good as it gets, and we see clearer than ever before, as if looking through strange, new eyes. What lucidity! Here's the dusk spooling over the avenue, slowly both closing it down and opening it up. There's a rose on the sidewalk, a blue skateboard in the gutter, and if we wanted to levitate it among so many other things deep into the sky, we could. The magician's touch on us at last, like stardust. Lenin in Muncie. He vigorously scratches his bald head. How'd he wind up here, and with all the planning he had planned to be doing in Zurich? His mistress, no doubt, searching for him there, by the banks of the river of beautiful swans. He walks down the street lined with trees and white picket fences, turning into a park where he sits on a bench, mentally exhausted. An American flag fluttering on a pole on a little public lawn greets him. And a boy strolling with his mother says, "Hi, Mr. Lenin." And at that moment, he says to himself, maybe there is a God, comrades. Who else would do this to me? And since we started with a poem about greatness, hopefully, I'm going to end with a poem entitled, a very short poem entitled, City of Great Things. The city is brimming with traffic and construction. It bothers me, yet it consoles me greatly. My contradictions love me and persist. I look up at a tall building. Someone is waving, and I wave back always, always when this happens. Thank you very much.
You can go ahead. I was just going to thank all 3 wonderful readers who offered a superb menu of poetry tonight.